7:39, money can't buy you happiness. It's a saying we're familiar with, whether or not we agree, but there's new research out which seems to back up that claim.
The Office for National Statistics has been carrying out a survey to measure our well-being, and the results suggest that deprived areas of Britain are not necessarily the most unhappy.
We're going to be discussing this in just a moment. First, though, we went to a Christmas market and asked shoppers what put a smile on their faces.
Good job, live good without any problems, and have fun. That's it.
Children, dogs, animals, wildlife, people in general, nice people, and good food and good drink, and that's it.
Good friends.
Motorbikes.
Well, I just had cheesy, but my family. I won't say what's cheesy. I won't say happy with family. Yeah, my family.
She's had a struggle with cancer, so I think
I'm grateful to be
battling
here.
the other side of that is just really all you can ask for, I think.
Yeah.
Everything else is a bonus, really. But,
so I'm really happy now.
My missus, the girlfriend, nice and cheesy. Sausages, they're quite good. Christmas markets, they're quite nice. Yeah. Christmas itself is quite nice. Yeah. The holidays.
Time to do what you want.
Yeah, time's the killer. Yeah. Time to spend, a decent amount of time with good people. Stuff doesn't do it, but people make you happy.
Well, joining us now, Dr Mark Williamson, who's the Director of Action for Happiness, an organisation which promotes a happier society, and Dr Steve Davies is alongside him from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Very good morning to you both. Good morning. Mark, you've looked at the research. Who's happiest? The richest?
Well, it's very interesting. I think the starting point for all of this is that what makes for a happy life, a good life, is, I think, more about more than just our income, and that's what this report really backs up. And I think we should acknowledge that there's a huge link between our wealth and our happiness, but actually above a certain standard of living, many more things are much more important. Our relationships, the communities we live in, the feelings about the work that we do, and so on. So I think this report shows that whilst GDP matters, whilst our wealth matters, actually there's much more to what matters to us in life than just that. And in fact, actually what we should be doing is encouraging our leaders, our policymakers, to take a broader definition of progress, not just growing the economy, but thinking about what makes for the best human happiness and well-being overall in life.
Steve, is there any merit to this exercise at all? Can one really measure happiness accurately?
Well, there are big problems, actually. One of the remarkable features about these kind of research is that the statistic for life satisfaction, as they call it, is remarkably stable. It's about 7 out of 10. No matter what's going on in the world, it doesn't it doesn't correlate really with anything. And that does mean that it's in some ways not really that useful as a guide to policy. And I do think it's quite dangerous actually to say that therefore we should ignore things like GDP, because there is also, as Mark says, quite strong evidence that generally speaking people do tend to be happier, more content with their life when they have more resources at their disposal, when they're more in control of their lives, and money's obviously crucial for that. Yeah,
I mean, if life satisfaction is staying stable, does it mean that the UK is coping with the cuts and what's happening economically?
Well, I mean, I think Steve's making a good point, which is if you look over the last 60 years in the UK, as our economy has grown hugely, our well-being hasn't gone up in step, and which raises lots of interesting questions about what our priorities should be. But there are other countries that have not only higher well-being right now, but also that have seen that the sort of levels of life satisfaction go up. So it is possible to be happier, to have a better quality of life.
So does that mean, which is the happiest country, and what are they doing that's making them happy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, often countries like Denmark and Northern European countries often come up very high in some of these surveys. It's very difficult to draw exact comparisons about why countries are happier than others, but certainly freedom and autonomy matters, strong sort of sense of community, the feeling that there's a kind of a sense of equality, that people feel as though that others care about them. There's a sort of sense of mutual concern. These are all factors that some of these Northern European countries have, perhaps arguably better than the UK does. But I mean, it's a complicated picture.
Is there a problem with the measurement exercise in itself? Because it is, in effect, a box-ticking exercise, isn't it?
Well, yes, there is a problem. The real problem essentially is that you're asked to rate your satisfaction or happiness on a scale of, well, 1 to 3 in these cases, sometimes 1 to 5. What that means is that in order for a country as a whole to move up, an enormous number of people have to go from 2 to 3 or from 3 to 4 or 5 in a longer scale. And that's extremely difficult. And that means that it's not really useful as a guide to public policy, I would say. Now, certainly not at the national level. At the local level, the level of the individual workplace or the very small district, we do actually have quite good evidence as to what makes people feel better. But it seems to me that it's not very useful as a guide for national governance.
See, because Mark, if a sense of community is one of the things that makes people happy, well, you can't legislate for that at a government level, can you? Can't say, well, you must have happy little groups.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there are lots of things that government can't do, and there's much more to happiness than just government policy. But actually, I mean, I should clarify that those surveys actually measure from 0 to 10, not 1 to 3. Right, yeah. But actually, let's take a practical example. So something like the closure of a post office or turning a library or community facility into housing development. These are decisions that policymakers make all the time at a local level, at a national level, and they're normally making those decisions based on economic concerns. Will it create jobs? What does it do for the economy? But we all know instinctively there's much more to what matters to us than just the financial impact. A post office, for example, brings that social cohesion, that community, some of that trust and connection that's so vital.
But Steve, should that form part of the decision if, on an economic basis, it might make other people unhappy?
Well, that's a kind of decision that really needs to be made, I think, at the very local level, the individual level, the level of the individual firm, maybe very, very local government. And what I don't think we should do under any circumstances is have yet another excuse for national politicians to start interfering with what are really very private aspects of our life. Right. It should provide a framework within which people can pursue their own happiness and do so at a very personal local level, I think.
I have to leave it there. Steve, Mark, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
The weather may not make you happy this morning, but Carol always raises a smile. Morning.
Does.
Oh, thank you.